come in, come in. Hi, come on in. Oh, nice to see you again. Sorry, I'm carrying too many things. Let's put this coffee down. So, every so often I try and put books back on the shelves, but then of course as soon as you put it back you think, oh, there's something I want there. So I'm going to have to use these library steps, which were a Christmas present. Except they've now got too many books on the top, because the Tolkien is up here. I want to read, I thought that we could dip back into Tolkien. I love the fact that I've got the covers off them now. These books are red bound, because of course we're told that they were written down afterwards in the red book. Also, it's a particular thing for talking about a book that's red and then has black print in it. You'll see in a minute. Have a seat. We'll just close the door. So, when you and I have dipped into talking before, apart from the obviously dangerous moment when Bilbo first sees Smug, which I so enjoyed reading to you, we've mainly gone to the lovely places, the kind of warm, comforting places of kind of refuge and refreshment and renewal. We've been to sort of Rivendell and Lothlorien, or even the Prancing Pony that we were at. But I want to go to one of the kind of, in some ways, almost one of the darkest and most difficult moments in the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. And yet it's a moment into which an extraordinary light shines. And Tolkien does something really extraordinary, really daring. Because, I mean, the art of any storyteller is to make you so invested in the story, kindle your imagination so much that you're in that world. And that's certainly my experience. I expect it's yours reading this. For a moment you forget that you're reading a story. You're there. You're completely taken up with it. And yet there's an extraordinary and delicate moment. You would think that an author, once he's got you there, the last thing he wants to do is talk about books and stories and remind you that you're reading a book. And if he does decide to do it, then he has a very good reason for it. And Tolkien does that in spades, just the most brilliant thing. So this is towards the end of the middle volume, The Two Towers, and it's in the chapter called The Stairs of Cirith Ungol. And of course we don't know, we will discover that Ungol is has a deadly connotation. Ungoliant was the great spider at the beginning of times in the Silmarillion, and of course we're going to have after this the terrible encounter with Shelob in her lair. But at the moment they've come to they're climbing up these stairs on what's really going, almost for them, the whole object of the quest so far has been to get them into Mordor. They've almost not thought about what'll they do when they get there, but just to to break into the shadowed land which so many would otherwise want to flee. And there's a kind of little moment of rest on the stairs and an extraordinary conversation, which is, I think, one of my very favourite moments in the entire Legendarium. In a dark crevice between two great piers of rock they sat down, Frodo and Sam a little way within, and Gollum crouched upon the ground near the opening. There the hobbits took what they expected would be their last meal before they went down into the nameless land. Maybe the last meal that they would ever eat together. Wonderful sense of the poignancy of the moment. Some of the food of Gondor they ate, and wafers of the way bread of the elves. When they drank a little, but of their water they were sparing and took only enough to moisten their dry mouths. I wonder when we'll find water again, said Sam. But I suppose even over there they drink. Orcs drink, don't they? Yes, they drink, said Frodo, but do not let us speak of that. Such drink is not for us. Then all the more need to fill our bottles, said Sam. And there isn't any water up here, not a sound or a trickle have I heard. And anyway, Faramir said we were not to drink the water in Morgul. No water flowing out of Imlad Morgul were his words, said Frodo. But we are not in that valley now. And if we come on a spring, it would be flowing into it and not out of it. I wouldn't trust it, said Sam. Not till I was dying of thirst. There's a wicked feeling about this place. He sniffed, and a smell, I fancy. Do you notice it? A queer kind of smell. Stuffy. I don't like it. I don't like anything here at all, said Frodo. Step or stone, breath or bone, earth, air and water, all seem accursed. But so our path is laid. Yes, that's so, said Sam. And we shouldn't be here at all if we'd known more about it before we started. But I suppose that's often the way. The brave things in the old tales and songs, Mr. Frodo. Adventures, I used to call them. I used to think that they were things the wonderful folk of the stories went out and looked for because they wanted them, because they were exciting and life was a bit dull, a kind of sport, you might say. But that's not the way of it with the tales that really mattered, or the ones that stay in the mind. Folk seem to have been just landed in them. Usually their paths were laid that way, as you put it. But I expect they had lots of chances, like us, of turning back. Only they didn't. And if they had, we shouldn't know, because they'd have been forgotten. We hear about those as just went on, and not all to a good end, mind you. At least not to what folk inside a story and not outside it would call a good end. You know, coming home and finding things all right, though not quite the same, like old Mr. Bilbo. But those aren't always the best tales to hear, though they may be the best tales to get landed in. I wonder what sort of tale we've fallen into. I wonder, said Frodo, but I don't know. And that's the way of a real tale. Take anyone you're fond of. You may know or guess what kind of tale it is. Happy ending or sad ending. You may know or guess. But the people in it don't know. And you don't want them to. No, sir, of course not. Beren now. He never thought he was going to get that Silmaril from the Iron Crown of Thangorodrim. And yet he did. And that was a worse place and a blacker danger than ours. But that's a long tale, of course, and goes on past the happiness and into grief and beyond it. And the Silmaril went on and came to Eärendil. Why, sir, I never thought of that before. You've got some of the light of it in that star glass that the lady gave you. Why, to think of it, we're in the same tale still. It's going on. Don't the great tales ever end? No, they never end as tales, said Frodo, but the people in them come and go when their part's ended. Our part will end later or sooner. And then we must have some rest and some sleep, said Sam. He laughed grimly. I mean just that, Mr. Frodo. I mean plain ordinary rest and sleep and waking up to a morning's work in the garden. I'm afraid that's all I'm hoping for all the time. All the big important plans aren't for my sort. Still, I wonder if we shall ever be put into songs or tales. We're in one, of course, but I mean put into words, you know, told by the fireside or read from a great big book with red and black letters years and years afterwards. And people will say, let's hear about Frodo and the Ring. And they'll say, yes, that's one of my favourite stories. Frodo was very brave, wasn't he, Dad? Yes, my boy, the famousest of the hobbits, and that's saying a lot. It's saying a lot too much, said Frodo, and he laughed, a long, clear laugh from his heart. Such a sound had not been heard in those places since Sauron came to Middle-earth. To Sam, suddenly, it seemed as if all the stones were listening and the tall rocks leaning over them. But Frodo did not heed them. He laughed again. "Why, Sam," he said, "to hear you somehow makes me as merry as if the story were already written. But you've left out one of the chief characters, Samwise the Stout-Hearted. I want to hear more about Sam, Dad. Why didn't they put more of his talk, Dad? That's what I like. It makes me laugh. And Frodo wouldn't have got far without Sam, would he, Dad?" "Now, Mr. Frodo," said Sam, "you shouldn't make fun. I was serious." "So was I," said Frodo. "And so I am. We're going on a bit too fast. You and I, Sam, are still stuck in the worst places of the story. And it's all too likely that some will say at this point, 'Shut the book now, Dad. I don't want to read any more.'" "Maybe," said Sam. "But I wouldn't be one to say that. Things done and over made into one part of the great tales are different. Why, even Gollum might be good in a tale, better than he is to have by you anyway. And he used to like tales himself once by his account. I wonder if he thinks he's the hero or the villain. Gollum," he called, "would you like to be the hero? Now, where's he got to again?" There was no sign of him at the mouth of their shelter, nor in the shadows near. And of course we know that Gollum is in fact gone off to betray them to Shelob. It's an astonishing passage. And of course, you'll have had this experience as I did. You're deep in the story. You're holding the book, but you've forgotten you're in a book. You're completely with them. And then they suddenly wonder if they might one day be in a tale, in one of the great tales, the important stories, as Sam calls them. And of course you can't help thinking, but you are, I'm holding the book, it's all right. So there's a moment of hope, which is kind of hope there definitely for the reader, who knows it's not the end of the story yet. He knows there's this in another volume. But they don't know that, of course. Their end will come sooner or later. But just the thought of the tales, and of all the stories, of course, the one Sam remembers, not one of the great high elf lords, but Sam, or even Strider, Sam remembers the great, almost founding tale of the heroism of the small against the great, the heroism of Beren and Luthien against Morgoth, who is the really complete demonic figure. I mean, Sauron is only a servant of Morgoth, and the Silmaril. And then they realise they're in the story, and of course the light of the star, of Erendel's star, the Silmaril that's been set in the heavens, is there in the lady's starglass. And the memory of the tale, it gives them courage, it gives them hope. I mean, there's this wonderful description of Frodo's laugh. And you see Sam at his best. He's doing something which is completely encouraging to Frodo. You also see Sam's amazing humility, because when he imagines the story being told, he leaves himself out of it. He says, "Let's hear about Frodo and the ring," they'll say. "Yes, that's one of my favourite stories. Frodo was very brave, wasn't he?" This is a beautifully oblique way of praising and encouraging Frodo at one of his lowest moments. Sam leaves himself out, but Frodo, wonderfully, of course, sees that and praises Sam. And he says, and after the laugh, he says, "You've left out one of the chief characters, Samwise the Stout-Hearted. I want to hear more about Sam, Dad. Why didn't they put more about his..." And Frodo wouldn't have got very far without Sam, would he, Dad? It's wonderful. You can imagine if you're a father reading this to your kids, and the kids themselves, in a sense, have been brought into the story to ask the question. And it's beautiful that each of them praises the other. They're not full of the praise themselves. And if they'd done it directly, it would have been awkward and mawkish. It wouldn't. But they found this beautifully sort of slantwise way. But of course, it makes you think, gosh, if they, reading or hearing the tale of Beren and Luthien, have been strengthened and encouraged, what about you and I, reading the tale of Frodo and Sam? How has that affected us? Do we get into some dark places? God knows we do. Where this story, and perhaps even this very moment in this story, suddenly comes to our aid and clarifies things for us. And I think, when you called last, you may remember, I was very happy because Stephen Crotts was here, who's going to illustrate my Arthurian. And I wasn't allowed to tell you at that time, but I'm now allowed to tell you that I've got a publisher for it now, the Rabbit Room Press, and they're going to bring it out, and it's going to be beautiful like this. It's going to be like this in several volumes. In fact, it's going to be in 4 volumes, each of which contains 3 books, like these 3 volumes contain 2 books. And I think this moment in Tolkien, I've just read to you, is part of why I'm doing it. I think we need the great stories. They need to be told and retold to generation after generation. And I was very much formed by hearing my mother tell the stories of Arthur, just as I was by hearing my dad read the stories of the Hobbits and the Shire and the Lord of the Rings. Dad started the Lord of the Rings with us and then let us finish it for ourselves, but he read the whole of the Hobbit to us. And I suppose I want in my own small part to take up the tale and to tell a story that perhaps my readers, perhaps years after they've read it, will suddenly come to a moment in their own life where the story turns and encourages them, just as this story turns and encourages us. It's a brilliant moment where suddenly, in a sense, we realise not only that they're in a story and we're holding the book, but we glimpse for a moment this extraordinary possibility that we're in a story, that there is somewhere behind us, as it were, transcendent of this world, one who utters the world into speech, that there is a great storyteller, a logos. And that's one of the ways I think about God, is I think of him speaking the drama of the world into action and looking at us inside it and encouraging us on to get through the darkest and most difficult parts of our story. So, yeah, it's one of the great moments, I think, in The Lord of the Rings, and it's a pleasure to share it with you. Thanks for dropping round.